Now Jenny.
Conspiracy theories, the paranormal, UFOs, aliens, and all things strange and unusual. This is Black Lotus. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hello.
Hello there.
So,
Folks, thanks for joining us once again. This is Black Lotus, and we talk about all things strange and unusual. And this week we are going to be talking about cryptids. And but guys, before we get into this, I got to get your take on this. What do you think about that former Israeli space chief that came out and said that aliens exist and that Trump knows about them? Did you guys hear about that?
I did hear about it.
I would think automatically some presidents come out and say, well, we really don't know. Bullshit. All the presidents that sit in that chair know because they have their own curiosity and they're the president. Private, tell me. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Did you guys also see the link? I think it was a week ago. President Obama was on Jimmy Kimmel, and he just straight up asked him, or it might have been Colbert. He was on a show, late night show. Colbert. Yeah. Colbert's like, what about aliens? Very directly. He's like, what can you tell me about aliens? Are they real? And Obama, he said, I can't talk about it. He wasn't joking. He didn't make a joke. He just said, I can't discuss it, which is very telling, I think.
Yeah, he said, you just gave me, he said, I take that as a yes.
Yeah. Yeah. He said, if there would have been nothing to it, you would have just said no. But instead you said, I can't talk about it. So
Yeah. So today, I was in one of those Facebook groups, and it's a group that deals with cryptids. And somebody had posted a question and asked, with all the thousands of hunters out there and all their thousands of trail cams, why is it that we haven't yet killed or captured a Bigfoot? And very few people have actually seen it. And, of course, Facebook being Facebook, people were responding, if you don't believe, why are you even in this group? But I thought, it kind of poses an interesting question. And the reason for that is that I don't think Sasquatch are stupid by any means, and if they know that there is a certain place that's, where there are people there with guns and shooting things, I think if I were a Sasquatch, I would avoid it at all costs, and I wouldn't even be in the area to be caught on a trail cam.
Yeah.
So, the North American forest and Canada, their forests are, deep and vast. So I think that there is a very good reason that these things are rarely seen. But it's interesting, though, because if you ask people if they've ever seen a UFO, or you've ever asked anybody if they've seen a ghost, I would wager to say that I would say probably 6 out of 10 people would say they have, or something they couldn't explain. But I asked recently in the Black Lotus discussion group, have you ever, those of you who believe in cryptids, have you ever seen one? And only one person in the group said that they had, and they had actually witnessed something twice. And that was Billy Bishop, and he lives in Louisiana.
What did he see?
I don't really recall right now. I can't remember what he said, but it was, he saw, I want to say he saw like a 4-foot creature that he couldn't identify. And then the other one was a large creature, like 6 or 7 feet tall, and he could see the eyes. But yeah, so guys, what's your take on this?
There is a biological component to these beings as well as an ethereal aspect of them. And I think as we're moving forward, we're finding this to be more and more true. One of the reasons that we haven't captured, a body per se, we have instances of hair samples or footprints or other, imprints left after the appearance of that, creature in a certain environment, but we don't have, a flesh and blood body that we can observe and, measure. In the way of their nature, if they are multidimensional, Well, you'd have to probably be around here for a very long time to garner that sort of knowledge, or in a sense, be in existence as, the race of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and, be much older than we would ever be able to estimate, to be able to manipulate and have the spiritual growth up to the point where that they might be able to sense you coming, with extrasensory perception much sooner than you and I would be able to detect something in our environment. And we talk about these concepts as sort of spiritual, but perhaps they are more natural in living beings. And given enough time, they would be able to cultivate that within themselves, within their race, within their tribes, that they might be much more in tune with the telepathic aspect of life and so forth. So they would have that advantage over us majorly if we're looking for something physical and they don't want to be around us.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that. Wild trees, you're a nature biologist, field researcher. What's your take on it? I mean, have you ever seen a cryptid out when you were out in the middle of the woods?
That's a good question. Yeah. So yeah, I've been in some really wild places, places not a lot of people are in. I've had paranormal experiences while I was at these places. Like, for instance, I received, I don't think I've talked to any of you guys about this, but I was at a research station, like one horse town, super biodiverse city, in a nature preserve. And I received a phone call, which I believe was from two non-humans. I have no idea what they were, they're aliens or whatever, but they were speaking a weird language that was like English, but they were using the words all wrong. And then the words they were saying just didn't make any sense, and they were talking to each other and laughing, and their voice sounded just inhuman. So that's the closest I've come. But yeah, so I haven't seen anything weird in nature. But I do have some, as far as Bigfoot specifically. So I will say, first of all, I do think that all problems in the paranormal probably have multiple solutions. So specifically, I think Bigfoot has multiple solutions. I do think some instances of Bigfoot are what Michael referred to, maybe multidimensional beings. I think it's possible that some of them may be just not figments of imagination, but physical manifestation of human emotion and thoughts. I also think, though, that there is a group of Bigfoot that are just flesh and blood animals. And I could talk about why those might not be seen and why I might not see them. So I do think there is a group of flesh and blood Bigfoots somewhere in the world, or maybe multiple places. But the things to consider are, number one, they probably have intelligence, very high intelligence, maybe higher than humans. They have incredibly good smell and taste, hearing. Also, humans, even hunters, they only go to certain spaces. They're kind of, it's very predictable where a human's going to go, even a hunter. So the Bigfoot will be able to tell where to avoid anyway. They probably bury their dead. There's probably not that many of them, maybe a few thousand. Like, if you took a few thousand people and said, hey, you guys live in the woods and do whatever you can not to be seen by humans ever, they could probably do it, So yeah, those are my thoughts on Bigfoot, why somebody hasn't seen him, and then why I haven't seen any. I will say also, I think a reason why, I mentioned this to Michael when I went on Dark Hour Paranormal. There's one research station I went to in Colorado. It's been around since the 70s, and every summer it fills up with researchers from all over the world, mostly biologists. And I'm friends with the director, and I asked him, hey, are there any legends here? Are there any creepy animals or UFOs, anything? There's absolutely nothing there. And I believe them. And I'm kind of starting to think that this area might be a paranormal cold spot. So we always talk about hot spots, areas with a lot of paranormal activity. I'm starting to hypothesize that this area, maybe other areas in the world, they're cold spots. Like, paranormal actively avoid this area, because I think there's so many scientists there actively looking at it that if something paranormal happened, they would probably want to get to the bottom of it. So that's another weird thing with the paranormal. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Fido needs to be fed.
Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Maybe they were abducted.
Who? Oh, you mean Damien? Yeah. All right, let me just keep talking about the paranormal. Yeah. So Bigfoot, I will say one area where I work in Texas, where I got the phone call, There has been Bigfoot sightings. I was actually on a road where there was a Bigfoot sighting. It was very recent in 2000s. This Bigfoot crossed the road, this little dirt road called Sunflower Road. Also, it's very interesting that this area where the Bigfoot was sighted, I've done analysis of the biodiversity of this entire area, and it's incredibly biodiverse. But that area where the Bigfoot was seen is the most biodiverse area of the entire biodiverse region.
Oh, wow.
So it's odd that that area would be the one with the Bigfoot sightings. Because I found a new...
I would think that we can't overlook their vision capacity. Maybe they have infrared vision. Maybe they have infrared intuition.
Definitely.
Like Wild Tree said, you can bet they've cased the establishment. They know every square inch of their territory, their forest, whatever the woods they're playing in. They know what it's likely to be trekked by humans, be it hunters or people going on hiking trails. But if we believe anything about the Tibetan Buddhist,
yes,
if I'm remembering correctly,
yeah,
that there is not necessarily a story, but a fact that in one of the Tibetan monasteries, there is a skull of a Yeti that is used in ceremony. So if that alone is true, that the Yeti is real and that is the Himalayan Bigfoot, then you got the skunk ape and you got Sasquatch, then you got Bigfoot. I think it's all true. I did have an experience with the cryptid 7-8 years ago.
Okay.
Going to South Louisiana to see my father. We usually travel the road. It's about a 7-hour hike. We usually do it about, early morning hours. There's no traffic. We can just, put on some cool music, do some Mother Earth, if you know what I mean, and just enjoy the ride. Well, it was her car, so she wanted to drive, and she just wanted to drive. So I'm leaning against the door with my head actually on the glass, just kind of getting a little sleepy in North Mississippi. So it's quite dark because all there are trees, pine trees and so forth. Okay. And so mile after mile of just straight highway, I'm leaning against this glass. And up ahead, let's say, I'm just going to pick a number, 100 yards, a couple hundred yards. There's just one of those little bridges that in a matter of a second you cross it, that it goes over a ravine. And so I'm leaning against the door, and Linda is driving, and I say, Linda. She said, what's up? I said, animal. And coming towards us, I wish the audience can see this. Maybe I can tell a little bit later. Coming towards us, but on my side of the road, the passenger side of the road, literally meeting us halfway on the bridge. He's coming to us in this, bouncy kind of walk, sort of like a dog. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And as the time gets nearer of the dog this creature being next to us, I'm looking at it outside the window as we pass it by, and I say, what? And I'm from South Louisiana. I know what creatures look like. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? And Linda saw it too. And so what this thing looked like, it had the body of a greyhound. Broad chest, very sleek when it gets down to the pelvis area, possibly for speed, that it's tapered off that way. But it also looked like a dog that had the mange or no fur at all, as if it was just caught and shaved and released back into the wild. The tail went down like a tiger. It was very long tail. It went all the way to the ground, and just before the ground, it turned up a couple inches. And here's the thing. It had a triangle head like a hyena. Right? So I immediately begin to ponder what this is. And the first option is it's Chupacabra. Well, come to find out, shortly after, when I get home back from South Louisiana, I go into Google Images. And the Chupacabra is an actual species of creature. It's not just folklore. It actually exists. So one day, I'm in the DMV getting my driver's license renewed or whatever, and this lady turns around, hey, Keith, last time I saw you band play, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. And she goes, can I show you something really strange? I said, sure. She said, look what my son captured in the backyard yesterday. And Linda was with me, and I said, Linda, check it out. It was a chupacabra. So these things actually exist. Anyone get on Google Images and type in chupacabra, and some of them are sketches, some of them are a little fudged, but you will find the authentic ones. It's actually obvious to tell which ones are.
Awesome. Wow.
I'm wondering what happened to our host.
I'm guessing that they lost connection, perhaps. Perhaps they lost connection.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking too. But that's okay. We can keep it floating as we go on. Hey, listen, Keith, you mentioned that you believe that the chupacabra is an actual species. What evidence would you say is out there to support it being an actual creature in the biological sense?
Well, I don't have any evidence. The evidence that I'm using is my logic, my intuition of what I think how things work. But you know what? When I don't know who was talking. I think it was you, Michael. We were talking about, we have proof or evidence of footprints. Oh, that can be faked. I get it, and I'm always one to believe. I like believing first before I doubt. But you can't fake hair samples. You can't fudge that, because within that the DNA. But then again, what can be fudged is the fact that it's just what do you call that? Debunking information, just to throw everything off. Because sometimes the truth can get muddled by other likely truths.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't have any concrete proof. I don't. I guess I fancy the idea.
No, don't we all, though? Something that's been of curiosity lately within the past, I'd say 3 years, has been this sighting of the Chicago Mothman, is what people are calling it. Now, the difference that it shares, well, no, I'm sorry, that's not the way to say it. The differences that it has between the Point Pleasant, West Virginia Mothman are vast. And I believe that this might be a misnomer for a new type of cryptid, flying humanoid sort of thing that we're seeing out there. And yet it's connected to the O'Hare International Airport. Have you guys read anything or heard anything about the recent multitude of sightings that have come out of these places, Chicago itself, as well as the airport as a central place? Have you heard anything about this? And if you have, what are your thoughts about this new cryptid people are seeing?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I think Lon is doing a lot of it. What's his last name? I just forgot his name. You had him on as a guest just now.
His name is Lon Strickler.
That's what I thought it was. I just wasn't sure. Okay. Yeah. So he talks about a lot. And then he did mention in his interview with you that, he wouldn't give it the name Mothman. Somebody else gave it that name. So he thinks, like you said, it's very different. But I have read those. What's interesting about those sightings is that, number one, there have been UFO sightings in American airports, I think. Maybe in Chicago. Wasn't there a UFO sighting at an airport? So it's
there was in 2005.
Yeah.
There was, a big one.
Yeah. And then the other thing about flying humanoids in airports, recently, these past few months, there have been in California, at least, there have been pilots seeing people on jetpacks. Humanoids on jetpacks, apparently. And they've been spawning them in like heights where technically you shouldn't be able to. There are jetpack technology. It's very expensive, but I think somebody did the math and they're like, at the altitude that these pilots are reporting these flying humanoids, it's not really a jetpack type distance.
You're absolutely correct.
I knew I recognized that name, Ron Myers, earlier that we talked about. I interviewed him just over a year, maybe about a year ago, just over a year ago, talking about Bigfoot and some of the footage, being in a particular metal barn, and there was this orb of light. I really enjoyed the guy. He got my attention, that's for sure.
Guys, can you hear us?
We can hear you.
Okay, something went very awry on my end. We lost internet connection. I had to restart the computer, and now it's not showing the cam for us. Are you guys able to see us?
No, but we can hear you, and you know what? If that's what we get tonight, we can work with it, man.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think it's gremlin.
Wrong, but...
I think a cryptid is to blame, and I think it's a gremlin showing up for the show.
So catch me up. Catch us up. What are we talking about here?
We talked about Bigfoot. I talked about a Bigfoot sighting in an area that I used to study. And what was interesting about that area was that it's very biodiverse. Like I did a study for the most biodiversity in this area, and that area was the most biodiverse, and it was a Bigfoot sighting. And then Keith talked about a Chupacabra sighting. He talked about how Chupacabras have been seen on video, which I think you guys did a video on Black Lotus. And you said some of those were like coyotes with mange. I think that might have been what he was talking about. Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that there's a distinction between the chupacabras that were originally reported in Puerto Rico, I think it was,
right,
and the chupacabras that are in the Southwest United States. The ones in the United States can be easily countered as just being, possibly coyotes or wolves with mange. But the ones that were reported in South America, they're a very different creature altogether, from the descriptions.
Absolutely. And then we talked about, Michael brought up the Chicago Mothman sightings that have been happening. And I pointed out some similarities with the UFO sighting that was seen at a Chicago airport. And I pointed out some similarities with the, this summer, there have been pilots like in Los Angeles that have been seeing people on jetpacks at heights where jetpacks really shouldn't go. So those kind of remind me of a flying humanoid sighting that's happening. I believe those are still unexplained. I mean, these summer sightings of people in jetpacks by pilots, I think there's no explanation yet for them.
Yeah, I've heard about those people in the jetpacks. It's very strange,
Now, it's common to talk about, these cryptids that we can go on Google and look up, a cryptid list, and we find all these popular ones that we like to discuss for many various reasons. But something that's always fascinated me, and I really don't have a thumb on with the vast amount of research I've actually done on it, is do dinosaurs still exist the way that we would think that they were back in their day and age? There's been lots of talk about, I think it's Mobley. I can't remember the name. If somebody in the chat recalls, go ahead and type
Double
that
M.
in.
Double M name from Africa.
Yes.
Like that. Yeah.
And this is supposedly some sort of plesiosaur or brontosaurus descendant of some kind. And, these things are seen all throughout the rainforest in very remote areas that the indigenous people talk about it being commonplace. What are your guys' thoughts on the possibility of some sort of prehistoric animal, such as a dinosaur, still existing today, beating out evolution and any other adversity it might come up against?
I think it's
absolutely possible. Yeah, go ahead, Trees. It's totally possible. I've seen video that's been faked and fudged when it comes to pterodactyls, but I've seen some videos on pterodactyls that was like, all right, I'm using all my CGI research experience and my want to cut through things with my eyes and go, all right, I'm looking. Again, I'm also looking through a filter of, I want to believe. I want to believe in the magic. But after I gather myself, okay, Keith, put your magical thinking aside for a second and objectively just see what's there. And sometimes in some of these pterodactyl videos that I've seen, I was like, if that's CGI, well, of course CGI is impressive. Star Wars. This is pretty impressive. It's passing behind power lines and trees and all these things. And so when you look at some of these animatronic kind of things, or even the CGI, it's always about, like we talked about this last week, I believe. It's always about the eyes, and it's always about the fluid motion. For example, this pterodactyl with the wings. It's not click, 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 click. So
right.
I believe the idea, it's very, very possible.
I do too.
Yes, he's going to be here for. The cockroach is going to be here for 1,000,000 years.
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible, and I've been saying this for a long time. I mean, most of these terrorist sightings that people are seeing are happening in the southeastern United States and into like Texas, and people need to realize that there are a lot of systems there. So I think that something like that could have survived throughout the years. But yeah, I completely believe that it could it's possible, I think.
Well, there's that fish that they thought was, I can't think of the name of it.
The coelacanth.
Coelacanth.
Yes.
Coelacanth, yeah.
They thought that was extinct and they found some still living. So why can't other things still be?
Awesome.
Yeah. And especially in the depth of the sea.
Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park says, life will find a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that, let me see. It's funny that we're talking, well, okay, yeah, first of all, there are a lot of animals that have survived a tremendous amount of time. Like sharks have been around for a long time. These are large animals. Sharks and crocodilians are large animals.
Horseshoe crabs.
Horseshoe crabs, there you go, very good one. Yeah. Those guys have been around forever. So yeah, so the idea animals can survive, and then it's funny we were talking about pterodactyls because I was going to mention modern pterodactyl sightings. So, well, first of all, I'll say that pterodactyls, they're not technically dinosaurs. It's because of the shape of the hip. They actually fall into prehistoric reptile area, but you know, you can consider the dinosaurs. They look a lot alike. But I have a friend. His name is Robert Beto, and he's got a great YouTube channel called Mexico Unexplained. And I did a podcast with him.
Wow.
And he's collected a lot of stories, firsthand accounts, very up close, like hitting the windshield of their car in Texas, southern Texas, and Mexico of basically pterodactyls, like very, very large birds. A lot of the sightings he's picking up. So it's a good place to hide. I mean, if you're a big bird that lives in the sky and you probably perch in a mountain or a tree, you're not going to be very visible for a lot of times. You know?
Frapsap from the chat room says pelicans in flight resemble tetranodons. Yeah, I totally get it. Being from South Louisiana, I know that the state bird, and I've experienced it much of my early life, is the eastern brown pelican. At a distance, I would say absolutely unequivocally, without a doubt,
right,
they would represent that. But in fact, if it's that far away to where you're not sure if it's a pelican or a flying reptile, then I would definitely lean into that it's a pelican. Until it's up close to where you have now something of a little more concrete nature to say, you know what, I'm open to possibility. And I even want to, you know, cut this tree down, say this. But when something inside begins to move and resonate, says, you know, real or not, maybe is not so important. Maybe the fact that it's got your attention is actually more valuable. I think more of the paranormal, the world of the not known universe, is more real than the things that we grasp, touch, fondle, handle, experience every day. Because in that is infinite possibility. You know, down here, we all have a little bit of scientist in it. And make sure that it tastes exactly like it's supposed to, process it how I think it needs to, because that's what I was taught. True process is and how it goes down. I think we're living in the most amazing time to where that veil is completely removed. Pterodactyl creatures, thunderbirds. My God, the Indians will tell you about thunderbirds.
Yeah,
you know,
thunderbirds.
Yeah, and I believe unicorns. You know, even unicorns are real, because you can bet that if out of all the cryptids we are speaking about, not that a unicorn is cryptid, that sounds a little dark, this majestic, beautiful creature, but you can bet or likely that if one of them out of all of the cryptids are real, then they're all likely or real. You know, we just don't want to open our minds and our hearts up to a greater possibility that this is happening, and we're blessed to be able to see all this.
Well, you raise a lot.
Oh, I was going to say, you were talking about dinosaurs possibly existing today. And, you know, that's been a theory about the Loch Ness Monster and other lake monsters throughout the world. I happen to believe what the scientists are recently saying, that they found a lot of eel DNA in Loch Ness. However, the sightings that people have had are larger than any eel known to mankind. You know, I think it's the conger eel. Is that what it's called? That's the largest eel in the world, and it only measures up to, like, I think 5 feet long. You know, and so I wonder if what people are seeing, like in Loch Ness, is not necessarily some sort of reptile. What they're seeing is maybe a school of these eels, these larger eels. So it looks like it's
longer and
bigger than it actually is. Yeah.
The only issue I have with that theory is that there were many instances, especially in the early part of last century, where people were talking about this being, walking about the earth, out of the water, that there were reports of some sort of flippers they were using to kind of like in the motion of maybe a seal would move, kind of get across land, crossing in front of cars where it stopped traffic. So while I think and lean more towards this being, a possibility of what you're mentioning here, that this is an eel in the Loch Ness that we've been dealing with, or at least this is what we've seen, I can't discount the rest of those experiences that purport this thing being on the land. What do you guys think?
You got Ogopogo up in Canada.
Yep.
Ogopogo, and it's obvious, I don't know about obvious, but obvious in the playing about the idea that they have been described in folklore, myth, and legend, and by current local people, that they have had glimpses of these things. And from Scotland to Canada, they seem like they're describing the same things. And some of the footage and some of the photographs that people are collecting, it seems like it's just, sort of like two of the same species of animal we have in America, maybe in Australia, but there's some differences because of the continental spread. It seems like Ogopogo in Loch Ness, or first cousins or third cousins, whatever it is.
What do you think about the thing? I mean, putting aside the reports that these things have been seen walking outside of water, putting aside that theory, what do you think about the idea that it may be some sort of sturgeon, large sturgeon,
that goes underwater? You think?
What's that?
That would be underwater for that amount of time, that it would only surface, and that's really the quick glimpse of a sighting that we get. I see where you're going with it, but because of the amount of time it seemed to spend underwater, I would say that probably doesn't fit. But that's just what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sturgeon are interesting because they themselves, sturgeon are very prehistoric fish. They were around in prehistoric times, and they have remained unchanged. So that's just an interesting connection.
Well, let's throw this into the gumbo, and that's fantastic you said that, because it sets up just an idea, whether I believe it or not, it's just another variable. And because they have been around for a long time, they have had more opportunity to be able to shift into something else. Now, whether evolution is real, I think evolution is absolutely real. But notice it does not exclude creationism either. I think creationism is the beginning and the planting of a seed of something, and evolution is the ongoing process through which things unfold. Now, whether a monkey over a period of time has actually become turned into a man, that remains to be seen. But I think the missing link is not necessarily the monkey that in between the adaptation phase that they're looking for, or finding an amoeba 20 miles under the ocean floor. That's not what I'm saying. Maybe the missing link is actually information. And so I think it's very possible, if sturgeon or any creature has been around for so long, their opportunity to adapt to the dinosaur crisis, if it was a meteor, oh my God, it's hot as shit. How are we going to survive? And so they've learned, because Jeff Goldblum, life will find a way.
Life will find a way. That's right.
It makes it real easy for me. The earth is not flat.
Listen, I'm down here. I'm listening to what you're saying and enjoying every moment of it. Keith, I have to admit very quickly that when you said sturgeon, I thought you said something else, and I was picturing a bird with a very long white neck that sometimes can grow very large, and that's what. And I realized you guys were talking about the fish. So what I just said has absolutely no relevance to the conversation. Sorry, I just want to clear that up, man.
Well, I tell you what, there is
the water
a bird
for a long time. No, that's no match.
There are some birds in South Louisiana that are just like what you described. They're very tall, huge white birds with long spears for freaking beak. The cattle egret, cowbird, the great blue heron. I mean, they eat small alligators. I mean, these birds are freaking huge.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah.
I do want to mention
look at it this way: if an alligator and a crocodile can survive as long as it has, then certainly other things could. Most certainly, and I think it goes back to what you were saying about evolution. They just adapt.
I totally agree.
I think there's no question. I think there's no question that there's several species that are undiscovered. And I think, furthermore, there's no question that there's several large species that are undiscovered, like large ocean animals. There was just a new whale species discovered very recently, within a year. But I think, it's funny, because if you talk to a skeptic or someone, if you tell them, do you think there's new species out there? They'll say, absolutely. And then if you say, do you think there's large new species on Earth we haven't discovered? They'll say, absolutely. But then you throw in this one little thing, one tiny thing, you say, okay, well, do you think any of those species are as smart or more smart than humans? Then suddenly they're like, no, that can never happen. But it's not that big of a jump to take, that some of these species are as smart or smarter than humans. And these would be
I think it's very arguable that Sasquatch are smarter than humans. I really do.
Yeah.
We came back in when you guys were talking about Ronald C. Meyer, and we interviewed that guy on our podcast, Paranormal News Network. Very interesting guy, and I met him through Gavin Davies, and I saw his Amazon movie that he wrote and directed, and it was the first time I had ever heard of that sort of thing, that Bigfoot is transdimensional,
Right.
and so I was pretty fascinated by it, and then I looked into it, and I guess this is something big in the UFO or the Bigfoot community, and it's highly debated.
Well, it would make sense of why they disappear so easily and nobody sees them.
Yeah, I'm still on the fence about it, but I can see the validity behind that, most definitely. And so if that's the case, then they are certainly more intelligent than human beings are.
Well, if there are species walking around with interdimensional capabilities, I mean, that would sort of make them walking in between worlds. So, I mean, while we're predominantly physical, kind of exploring the etheric side, and those who are already passed over, or spirit itself in essence is formless, okay, here you have some sort of species that walks, again, between the line of physicality and the etherics. That's pretty unique. Could that possibly be indicative of our own evolution, that one day we may take the place of those kind of beings, where we're walking in physicality and have a foot in the spiritual world? And one of the reasons I think that's very possible is because it's been said in Atlantis that's exactly how it was for a lot of the human population, if you want to call it that was there at that time.
That is not a possibility at all. It's an absolute fact. We are growing into that level, that dimension, that reality, that truth that supersedes and surpasses all other beings. Now, someone talked about earlier that, what is to say that these creatures are not as smart as us? Sadhguru was speaking about interdimensional, walking the earth from the ethers onward to the mud that we step on every day. In fact, he's the living proof of it. He has awareness in 16 dimensions simultaneously. But we're all moving beating our feet towards that possibility. But we talked about how some of the creatures that are being discovered, and some others, that they're not as smart as humans. Well, I would say the human being as a whole has the potential to contain the entire infinite package. But when it comes to dogs, their level of intelligence in the hearing and the smelling capacity, it so surpasses. We think, well, that's just a sense and they're just hearing and smelling. It's intelligence. I mean, there's a way that they're taking in information. So, and in this regard, they have completely surpassed what we're doing. Now, when it comes to the feeling level, who knows? Well, look at the level of loyalty that lies in a dog. Is that not freaking divine or what? So I think what we call intelligence and using to judge and or describe what we call intelligence is pretty shitty or pretty shoddy or pretty crappy. You're just not there yet, able to make us, who are we to say what is truly the it of it all? Ask a dog, he'll tell you it's me. Ask a cat, he'll say it's me. You ask humans and our arrogance and our egoism, of course. We think we have it a little bit better because we have commerce and democracy and all this stuff.
So with this whole interdimensional theory in mind, do you think the same applies to perhaps Yeti?
Yeah, I think these beings are walking through between worlds. X-ray vision, infrared. Maybe the infrared is the ability to know the area to say, this doesn't feel right because we are intuitive beings. And not only am I in the jungle by myself, forest by myself, they're talking to each other through grunts and banging on trees and stomping on the ground. An elephant will stomp on the ground and they can hear it subsonically from miles away. So who knows what little bells and whistles and tricks they have to say. Someone is approaching. And then reconnaissance goes out. You can bet that if Bigfoot are real and someone captures it on film, or maybe he didn't know I was there. No, he knew you were there. You're in his playground. He absolutely knew you were there and decided to give you a little bit of fun, a little charge, a little jolly.
Well, you're talking about communication, going back, saying in lines of Bigfoot. There's been a lot of reports of like wood knocking, tree knocking, and they think that that's how they communicate with each other. And then next thing you know, when you hear the recordings of these things, suddenly you hear this whoop, 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 whoop,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really interesting. I have to hand it to Bigfoot field researchers. I don't think I'd have the balls to do it. Because I'd be afraid of like trying to communicate with the thing and the thing charging at me, But I mean, there really hasn't been any reports of that happening, but still, I don't think I'd be able to do it.
But there have been a few, and if there's enough, if there's even one there that actually checks out, well, I mean, be careful. Like Patrick Vaughn says, and when I had him on the show some time ago, he is a survivalist and he's a Bigfoot tracker, but survivalist first when it comes to being in nature. He says that his purpose here is not just to share his story, for the sake of, hey, let's add something else to the pot. But he's actually saying it in the way of warning people that when you go into certain stretches of the woods, you have to be careful and you have to have this knowledge and be aware that this is out there. He's not saying it's a possibility. He's saying this is the next step, realizing that it is. All right. Don't be foolish. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
This interdimensional thing, I think, plays into an idea I have about a lot of cryptids. Okay, so most traditional biologists, I think they make the mistake of dismissing these cryptids, and they take a short view of the subject. So what we know from a physical and ecological perspective in biology is that different animals have different adaptations and different relationships to one another. Okay, so this is very well understood. So adaptations, just like Keith was talking about, dogs have incredible adaptations as far as smell and hearing. Mm-hmm. Humans have really good communication, brain power. Okay, so that's adaptations. Now, animals also have a relationship that is they have relationships within each other. For instance, humans domesticate certain animals like horses and cows. That's a relationship going on. Bees pollinate flowers. There's relationships going on. All right. Now, so thinking about these adaptations and these relationships, I think most biologists make the mistake of thinking that humans are the end all be all on Earth. They're like, humans are the absolute top. We have the best adaptations and we have the best behavioral relationships with everybody else. They don't think about the possibility that, hey, we could just be another cog in the ecological machine. There could be other organisms that are manipulating us just the way spiders manipulate ants. Like, since we're highly intelligent, if an animal were going to manipulate us, they'd have to be even more intelligent. But I think we're not the end all. Humans are not the end all. There are other organisms alive that manipulate us with their behavior. And I think they have adaptations that are uncommon or we don't know yet. For instance, I think an adaptation would be traveling through time. Another adaptation would be going through portals or making portals. So I think some of these cryptids are actually they're just animals. But the mistake that scientists are making is they're thinking they're not opening their mind to the possibility that there's animals out there that could be manipulating us. That manipulation it doesn't have to be a bad thing, It could be a benign thing or it could be a good thing. But I think there are more intelligent animals that do manipulate us, and I do think there's some radical adaptations, including time travel and the formation of portals and interdimensional travel.
Well, I know my cat tries to manipulate me.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And for some people, their pets do.
Yes.
I like that answer, Wild Trees. That was really, really good, man. I liked that a lot.
Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So all right. Well, how about the Dover Demon, a cryptid that was sighted for, let's just say it was 36 hours, but it couldn't have been much more than that. So this thing was sighted along a stretch of road by several people, and I believe that it was also in people's backyards, peering into windows. I'd have to double check on that, but I think that was part of the phenomenon. And then, yet after that length of time, it was gone. Now we could talk about portals. Okay, maybe it came in through a portal and exited through a portal. Let's suggest that maybe that wasn't the case. What else could it possibly be?
Right. I'll mention what I mentioned to you, Michael, on Dark Hour Paranormal, is that there's a paranormal researcher named Zelia Edgar, and she's got a YouTube channel and a Facebook page called Just Another Tinfoil Hat. And so she gives a hypothesis for the Dover Demon. So she makes the observation that Dover Demon did not seem to have a mouth or a nose. And so it's like, okay, if this is a real animal, then how is it going to eat or how is it going to breathe? So she was like, okay, well, perhaps it's not a real animal like we think of traditionally. Perhaps it's a creation of like human mind, or it's an expression of human emotion.
Fantastic, bro. Fantastic, my friend. I would say that as we were talking about, so poetically how this all comes to this, or at least an idea is that we think we know what intelligence is because we're expecting to look for it on another planet to look like us, a hominid walking around, going to restaurants and doing these things. But scientists fail to see, they don't fail to see, but in this regard and this looking for life, they fail to see that it's life that's spinning that very planet they're looking for life on in the first place. So this planet is spinning and they overlook this. And so I think we're overlooking the possibility that some beings are so intelligent that they just simply, they can just project what you want to see. And not only do what we're experiencing is projecting consciously to show themselves in a way that we understand, because maybe what they actually look like is not a way we can actually understand. And then when we actually see the projected image, one that we understand or one that we don't understand, then the mind goes to work and it paints its own conclusion towards something that could be simply very, very pure projection. We're talking about intelligence. Can a human cell be the most intelligent creation there ever was? Everything comes from the cell. Everything. There's no monkey-mindedness in there. There's no muddleness in there. It's intelligence in motion. It's a verb. A capital verb, the human cell. It does what it does. It's not thinking. Intelligence is what's moving it around, unfolding, adapting, and evolving. So I think we're not so high on the intelligence level, but I think what gives us a leg up is that we're the ultimate and the divine level and the possibility that all entails.
Well, I think you're very right about that. I think we have these preconceived notions of what aliens look like,
Right.
and and we always attribute them to humanoid figures, and that may not always be the case, So that could possibly explain that.
There's many creatures in this world. There's Earth. There's things in the ocean that just don't look normal, and things that we're discovering that have different characteristics than we're normally seeing. So what makes us think that everything else is going to be the same as us? No,
Right? Yeah,
totally agree.
Back in the 1800s, if a fisherman told someone, I saw this fish and it looks like this and it's got teeth this long and it's got a light above its head, you'd say you're so full of crap. And now we discovered the anglerfish. And so who's to say that right now we're not in the late 1800s of said scenario to where in 100 years from now we got people then are going to look back and go, oh my God, it was.
Let's talk about that for a moment, because there are a lot of creatures that we know exist today that were the stuff of legends years ago, like, for instance, the giant squid. And people always said, "Oh, that's just old fishermen's tales." Well, evidently not.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The most mysterious thing to me is the ocean. Sorry, go ahead, Wild Trees.
I'll just say real fast. Absolutely, I think the ocean is going to be where we find a lot of large, interesting life. The ocean is so big, it's so deep, it's so unexplored. We're going to find a lot of weird stuff there, and we're learning that USOs are a huge thing. That unidentified submerged objects, basically UFOs of the ocean, they're a huge thing, which makes sense.
If these microbes that eat rock. These microbes at the bottom of the ocean in these volcanic vents, they live in this extreme heat.
Right.
As the scientific model, so to speak, they call it the Goldilocks zone. That automatically pigeonholes scientific exploration to say that life cannot exist beyond this Goldilocks zone. But these microbes or these bacteria are living in these freaking God knows how hot these volcanic vents. Not surviving, they are thriving. This is their place of dwelling.
Somebody had mentioned earlier that the Silverback Gorilla was the stuff of legend, at one time, and
Absolutely.
it's only relatively recently that, well, not recently, but that it was discovered. And somebody else had mentioned that people are going further and further into the jungles of Vietnam, and they're discovering some new stuff too. I'm not sure what, but yeah.
And if they discovered something, you can bet that they didn't know what either.
Yeah.
What is that?
But I'm sure these things that they're discovering were the legends from the villagers forever, and people just didn't believe them.
Sure.
Well, that's been the case, but also keep in mind too, going in the way of not knowing what you're seeing. There were a lot of reports of these sea monsters from the days of yore, and maybe there was no classification system for some of those bigger mammals that were swimming in the sea then and even now. What they saw as a sea monster might have been an enormous whale, or we all know the Kraken. So there's been light shed on that particular phenomenon as time has gone on too. We know that the giant squid exists. When it was only maybe, let's say, 15 years ago, it might have been less than that. It was really just a theory. So
there's a theory out there that the Megalodon still exists in the ocean. They say that it exists in places like the Mariana Trench.
Right.
Yeah. But then I hear other people saying it's not possible for a creature that large. It would have to have a sustainable environment, and the Mariana Trench doesn't have that kind of environment where it has as much as it would need to sustain itself. What do you think about that?
Hello, blue whale. I mean, I understand a megalodon is oodles bigger than a blue whale, but what about the pods of blue whales? I mean, the ocean is so vast, and it just covers the freaking globe. I mean, or the flat earth, but it covers the freaking earth. And how deep is this? 7 miles. And, I would say at the shallowest point of any ocean has to be at least a mile or miles deep. Mm-hmm. We have only begun to pull off this scab of what actually lives underwater.
Yeah, we have no idea.
No idea.
We have no idea what's down that low.
And we might just assume, that the habits of some of these larger animals reflect the habits of the smaller ones that we know of. So, for example, if you have a megalodon shark and it's still there, I mean, we don't know that this isn't a predator that sits and waits for its prey instead of going out and actively hunting. We don't really know how it metabolizes its energy. We don't understand its migratory patterns in any way, shape, or form. It's possible that they come through the Mariana Trench, have a quick bite to eat or so forth and move on to wherever they're headed. So it's really hard to tell when it comes to the existence of some of these creatures because there's so little information beyond a name.
Right. Strangely, and again, it's all about evolution, I think,
Absolutely. So, how this might fit in if we go back to, maybe you guys heard this story about Christopher Columbus. Supposedly that when he came to the shores of America, that the natives here couldn't see the ships. They didn't understand what a ship could possibly look like. So they couldn't see the ship. And I'm paraphrasing the story, the article, or the truth of it all, which is, someone had to basically explain it. Do you not see those things up there? And I kind of see a little something. But never could they understand what they were seeing because their mind has never, if I tell you about the color green, all I want, until I show you that these little creatures right here, these little cryptids, these little elves, are green, you will never make the aha connection. And so that being said, some of these beings, these creatures, these cryptids may show up in our experience, and we just don't know how to process that. In fact, so much so that we may just shut it off completely and just dismiss it to where nothing's actually really ever happened.
I wanted to mention something that move into something a little bit different. It's still about cryptids, but let's talk about actually. Okay, so when there's a new species of animal, like all the animals that we know of, like a giraffe, rhinoceros, how did it become known? How do we accept it? Well, usually what happens is somebody has to catch one alive, and then usually that specimen, the bones or the skin, it gets deposited in a museum. That's called a type specimen, okay? Then a formal paper is written that completely describes the animal. It's a new animal. This is why it's new. This is what it looks like. Here's some drawings. This is where I found it. This is when I found it. And then that specimen is put in a museum. And then that way anybody can go see it and verify. So there's no discussion. Is this really an animal? Well, just go check. Okay. So how do we move to this space with some of these cryptids? Okay. So that's what I want to talk about. How can we move some of these cryptids from the imagination or from accounts into concrete reality and accepted reality? So really what we're talking, like I mentioned, you need a body. So what we're talking about is how do you catch one of these animals? And it seems like the hardest thing, but the methods that I've been developing to trap some of these cryptids, they involve the trickster element. So we always hear about the paranormal is a trickster. Paranormal will play tricks on you. It'll be smarter than you. It'll be one step ahead of you. Like, so the methods I've come up with, in order to trap some of these cryptids, you have to become a trickster, basically. So as an example, one of my hypotheses is that poltergeist, some instances of poltergeist, not all of them, some of them are caused by an animal that can travel through time and feeds on human emotions or energy. And so how do you catch one? Well, I have a podcast where I go over it, but basically you have to trick it. You have to trick it into believing that there's an actual family that actually love each other and they're actually having fights, but it's all just a big ruse. And you have hidden cameras and you have mirrors and you have all these layers of deception. So basically you have to become a trickster to catch one of these paranormal things, because that's what they are. You have to fight fire with fire. Another way of thinking about it is basically, how would you catch a spy? Let's say there's a spy, like a Russian, Ukraine, Indian, whatever country, Scottish spy. They're very tricky. If you're going to catch a spy, you have to be even trickier to do it.
Right.
You know, the definition, as far as I know, of a poltergeist. Let's say you have a house, people living in the house, lots of people, whatever. And there's a lot of negativity floating about. That this negativity, as the people, let's say they're alcoholics and just violence and just no harmony in this house, that this energy will collect, for example, let's say like water and oil. But when the globules of water or oil meet together, it begins to grow. It begins to grow. It begins to grow. So this negative energy that's collected in the corner over a period of time and over time has grown, it becomes intelligent to a level to where it can actually have a will versus sitting there waiting for everybody else to join to continue to grow. It becomes intelligent and it begins to move things around. Basically, it's a manifestation or a mirroring of said people in the house with all their negative problems, which is, I want to throw this freaking flashlight at you so I can smash your freaking head kind of idea. So, but poltergeist, I don't know if you can capture one. Because I don't think it's a capturable thing. You might capture it on camera and its activity of what it's doing, but I don't think it's almost borderline corporeal like a ghost. I think it's an erratic energy form. I'm not saying it might not take a form, but this reminds me of the movie Entity. Anybody see that movie, The Entity?
Yeah.
Where they had to become, as you said, Wild Trees, they had to become a ghost. And smarter than the ghost, they had to think and process like a ghost. And they set up this trap to where when this energy, this entity moved through this room, that they froze it with nitrogen, liquid nitrogen, and had it still. But that's my thoughts about that.
Well, I will say real fast that if I could expand on the trapping aspect, okay, this is a very non-traditional form of trapping because it's a non-traditional animal. So by no means, when this thing is trapped in my thought experiment, it's not a physical trap. It's not a cage. Okay, it's more of a mental trap. You're basically trapping it without it knowing that it's trapped. So basically, just to summarize, you basically, the trap is the house that you're in. You're basically containing it in a house, containing its activity and feeding it, making it stay there for a while without it knowing it's stuck. And then you could observe it. So it's basically, let's say, instead of trapping a tiger in a physical cage, you basically trap it in an acre of woods and you keep food there for it. And in that way, it's trapped because it doesn't want to leave. It likes being there. And so it's a psychological trap. You're trapping it with your intention and with its desires is basically how that trap would work.
Have anyone of you guys seen the movie 13 Ghosts?
Yeah, I heard it's good.
I have. I don't remember much from it though.
Basically, a quick trailer is this guy. He's a psychic. He's going into this house that was whatever, and there were these ghosts. And the way they trapped the ghosts is by writing spiritual laws on these glass walls. They can't get through the glass wall. They can get through the glass, but they can't get through the code because it's a law that doesn't allow them to escape. And Wild Trees, I think it's completely mental because ghost, poltergeist. I think this is what I want to say. You talked about trapping a tiger. We think this will shed light and it actually blow the bars off the windows about trapping ghost tigers and what we think as scientists what life's supposed to look like and this and that. Same model. If I was to ask, here's a tiger in a cage. What is holding the tiger in the cage? Everybody's just say, ooh, me, Mr. Carter, me, Mr. Carter. It's the bars. That's not it at all. Well, Keith, it's the bars that holds the tiger. No, it's not. So this is erroneous perception. Correct perception is it's not the bars at all. It's the space between the bars that holds the tiger. Chinese proverb. So if the spaces were small, the tiger can't get out. So if the spaces were wider, the tiger can get out. So we are automatically, as scientists, looking through the microscope in the wrong direction. It's the empty space between the bars that holds the tiger. And so in order, like you said, Wild Trees, to trap, study, ghost, mystical, paranormal phenomena, we have to get out of what we think actually makes it work.
You have to think about it radically different than you would normally.
It's completely radically different.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because
I think
if we had it the right way, we'd already have a ghost.
Yes,
we'd already have a Bigfoot.
We would have done it.
I was going to say, I think it goes with the cryptids too, that, we have to do it other ways than you would normally think of it. Because cryptids are this smart to keep us from seeing them or knowing about them, then there's just not going to fall for an easy trick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely correct. Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to probably get out of here pretty quickly. I think it was Off-World. He said there is odd deep ocean audio recordings, and then Frapsap. Sorry. He mentioned the bloop.
Yeah.
Have you guys heard about the bloop?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And so my question for you,
I have not. Can someone give me
is
a quick overview? What is a bloop?
Oh,
it was this audio recording from deep sea, and they don't really know what it was or where it came from, but it was like so loud that it went throughout the entire oceans of the world. And bloop because it sounded like bloop.
Bloop.
But I mean, I wonder if. So my final question for you guys tonight is, what do you think these recordings, these underwater recordings are, and do you think that they could possibly be made? So like the bloop, it was something in the earth.
Tectonic plate shifting.
Yeah, maybe.
Creating
That's
an
a
air
theory.
pocket.
That's a
creating an air pocket that when it gets to the top of the water, it says bloop. I would like to, before I exit, I would like to offer out, but maybe a show suggestion could be Mel's Hole. Anyone familiar with Mel's Hole?
I know Mel's Hole.
That's crazy. In the form of, being a cryptid investigator. Mel's Hole.
Good suggestion. Very good suggestion, bro.
and then I will say, going back to the bloop, I think what's unfortunate about the bloop in similar instances is that there's no repeatability. Like,
Right.
it only happened once, so it's a severe lack of data. But it could be cracking the door open, like letting us know that this is a possibility. So that could be the opening for us to conduct more experiments where we monitor, certain areas. But that instance by itself, it's just so little information. It's hard to make a conclusion.
I think that's where the magic is, the Wild Tree, and I love it. I think you're absolutely correct. That it doesn't happen. it happened, but it doesn't happen. So that would create a curiosity. What could this be? And in the what could this be curiosity, I think is when the magical wheel begins to move.
Sure.
Sure,
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
And I have to believe that something that far reaching, in the respect to how far everything traveled, and obviously the enormous amount of energy that was used to produce this sound, to me, just thinking about it, I feel like it has to be something terrestrial. I don't think there necessarily was any sentience behind it. I don't necessarily subscribe wholeheartedly to the tectonic plates moving theory, but again, something that makes a sound like that literally shakes a celestial body. It to me, it seems like it had to come from within somehow.
If there was a bloop, they had to be air.
Well, it's
And
not.
I'm
It
not
wasn't
saying that
technically a
100%.
bloop. No, it wasn't
So that's
technically a
just call
bloop.
it. I got you.
Yeah,
Got you.
yeah. It's just the name. In fact, I'll send you over the recording because it's actually quite interesting.
I would
Keith,
love it. Thank
after
you.
the show.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Do that,
Absolutely,
bro.
man.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's get out of here for the night. Thanks a lot for being here, as always. And also, as always, to our viewers, we appreciate you very much. And do us a favor and share this around. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and make sure you hit the little bell so you're reminded every time we're doing a new episode. But I think we are going to get out of here. Keith, Michael.
Thank you, Damien and Ralph. Thank you, Damien and Ralph.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Talk to
guys.
you guys later.
Merry
Absolutely.
Christmas.
Cheers.
Peace.